It was a chilly morning, the kind that makes most children pull their jackets tighter and hurry toward the warmth of their classrooms. The schoolyard was already alive with chatter, laughter, and the sound of sneakers hitting the pavement as groups of students ran to catch up with their friends. Among all this energy, one boy stood quietly at the gate. His clothes were worn out, his shirt a little too big for him, and his shoes, well, if they could still be called shoes. The soles were torn, the laces broken, and every step he took was a struggle. He held his school bag tightly, though even the bag showed the signs of long use, threads sticking out, patches of faded fabric, and a zipper that no longer closed properly. His eyes, however, told a different story. They were full of hope and longing. He wanted to join the other children, to sit in the classroom and learn, to laugh with friends during recess, and to run freely without the constant fear that his shoes would fall apart completely. But instead, he stood outside the gate, watching. Each time a student walked past him, he stepped aside to make way, his gaze lowering in embarrassment. Some of the kids noticed his shoes and whispered to one another, giggling as they walked past. Others ignored him completely, too busy in their own world to notice the small boy whose world was crumbling quietly at the school gate. He had tried so many times to walk into the school with confidence, pretending as if nothing was wrong. But the cruel comments, the laughter, and the stares from other kids had broken his courage. Each insult had made him retreat further into himself until now, simply standing at the gate and looking inside had become the only part of school he could bring himself to face. Yet, deep inside, his heart ached to learn. He wanted to hold a pencil in his hand, to read books and solve math problems, to raise his hand proudly when the teacher asked a question. More than that, he wanted to feel like he belonged, like he wasn't any less than the other children. That morning, as the bell rang, he sighed and sat down on a low wall beside the gate. The cold ground made him shiver, but he stayed there, hugging his bag as if it could give him some comfort. His eyes followed the students running in, each with polished shoes, new backpacks, and bright smiles. He wondered what it must feel like to have that kind of life. To him, happiness seemed like a faraway dream. He didn't know that this very morning would mark the beginning of a change. He didn't know that someone would notice his quiet pain and that a small act of kindness would turn his world upside down. At that moment, he was just a boy with broken shoes, sitting outside a school gate, waiting for a chance he thought would never come. The boy sat on the low wall by the school gate, lost in the noise of laughter and footsteps rushing past him. The world seemed to move quickly for everyone else, but for him, time always felt heavy and slow. He pulled his knees closer to his chest, wishing he could just disappear. That's when a man walking down the street noticed him. He wasn't anyone extraordinary, just an ordinary man on his way to work, wearing a simple shirt, holding his coffee in one hand, and carrying a worn leather briefcase in the other. But what made him different was that he actually stopped. Most adults walked past without a glance, assuming the boy was just waiting for someone. This man, however, noticed the sadness in the boy's eyes and the way he hid his shoes under his bag. Something in his heart tugged. He slowed down and approached the boy. "Hey, champ," the man said gently, trying to make his voice sound friendly. "Why aren't you inside? The bell just rang." The boy hesitated. He wasn't used to people asking him questions. He kept his eyes on the ground, afraid of being judged. I can't go in," he whispered. The man crouched down so they were at eye level. "Why not?" he asked kindly. The boy's throat tightened. It was always hard to admit the truth. After a long pause, he quietly said, "My shoes, they're broken. Everyone laughs at me." His voice cracked with embarrassment, and he quickly tried to hide his feet behind his bag. The man's heart sank. He looked at the shoes, worn to the point of falling apart, the soles almost detached, and the laces nothing more than thin strings. They weren't just shoes that had been used for a while, they were shoes that had endured far more than they should have. The man stayed quiet for a moment, trying to hold back the lump in his throat. He remembered his own childhood, the times when he, too, had gone to school with patched-up clothes and how hard it had been to fit in. He knew exactly what the boy was feeling, the sting of humiliation, the longing to just be normal like everyone else. "Listen," the man finally said, his tone soft but firm, "you don't deserve to sit out here while everyone else is inside. You're just as important as any of them. You want to go to school, right?" The boy slowly nodded, still unsure if he could trust the stranger. The man gave him a reassuring smile. Okay then, let's do something about it. Don't worry, I've got you. For the first time that morning, the boy's eyes lifted from the ground. There was a flicker of hope, tiny, fragile, but real. Someone had noticed his pain. Someone cared enough to stop and ask. He didn't know it yet, but this small moment of humanity was about to change everything. The man stood up and gently motioned for the boy to follow him. At first, the boy hesitated. Trust didn't come easily to him. Life had taught him that people often walked away after offering kind words. But something about this man's eyes felt different. They weren't filled with pity, nor were they sharp with judgment. They were kind, steady, and warm. Come with me, the man said softly. We won't take long. I promise you'll be back before the first lesson ends. The boy clutched his torn bag tightly and followed, his small steps echoing nervously against the pavement. They walked down the street together, the man slowing his pace so the boy could keep up. Every so often, the boy glanced at him, wondering why a stranger would care. Most people had ignored him all this time. Why today? Why this man? Soon, they stopped in front of a small shoe store. The glass window displayed neat rows of polished sneakers, school shoes, and sandals. To the boy, it looked like another world, bright, clean, and full of things he had only dreamed of owning. His heart raced. The man pushed the door open, and the gentle jingle of the bell above it made the boy flinch. He had never been inside such a place. The smell of new leather filled the air, making him dizzy with excitement and fear. Pick a pair you like, the man said, smiling. The boy's eyes widened. For me, he stammered. Of course, for you, the man replied. You need them, don't you? Tears welled up in the boy's eyes. He had imagined this moment so many times, walking into a store, choosing shoes that weren't falling apart. But now that it was happening, he didn't know what to do. He looked around nervously, afraid the shopkeeper might scold him or someone might say he didn't belong here. The man knelt down again, his voice calm and patient. Don't be shy. Go on, pick the one you really want. Today, you don't have to settle. Slowly, hesitantly, the boy pointed to a pair of sturdy black school shoes with shiny buckles. They weren't the fanciest, but they were strong and new, and to him, they looked like the shoes of someone who belonged in a classroom. The shopkeeper brought them over, and the boy sat down to try them on. As he slipped his feet inside, he gasped. They fit perfectly. For the first time in years, his toes weren't poking out, and the soles didn't feel like they were about to tear away. He stood up, walking a few steps, his face lighting up in a smile so pure that the man's heart melted. Do you like them? The man asked. The boy nodded eagerly, unable to speak through the lump in his throat. Good, the man said, placing his hand gently on the boy's shoulder. Then they're yours. The boy couldn't hold back anymore. Tears streamed down his cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of joy. He whispered a shaky, "Thank you," his voice trembling but sincere. That small act of help, a pair of shoes, had given him something far greater: dignity, confidence, and hope. The next morning dawned brighter than usual, at least for one little boy. He woke up early, long before the sun had fully risen. His small room was still wrapped in shadows, but his heart was full of light. Beside his bed, carefully placed, were his brand new shoes. He had polished them with a soft cloth the night before, even though they didn't need it. To him, they weren't just shoes, they were treasure, proof that kindness still existed in the world. He slipped them on slowly, savoring the moment. The leather felt smooth, the soles strong beneath his feet. He walked back and forth across the room, listening to the faint squeak of newness with every step. For the first time in a long while, he felt proud of himself. No more hiding, no more lowering his eyes in shame. Today, he was going to walk into school like he truly belonged there. When he reached the school gate, he didn't linger outside like he used to. Instead, he stood tall, his bag on his back and his chin slightly raised. Other children began to notice. Hey, look at his shoes. One boy whispered to another. This time, though, there was no laughter, no pointing fingers. The shoes were new, shiny, and strong, just like everyone else's. As he walked into the courtyard, his classmates stared for a moment, then smiled. One of them even said, "Cool shoes." The boy's heart swelled. He had dreamed of this moment countless times, and now it was real. He didn't feel invisible anymore. Inside the classroom, the teacher greeted him warmly. He found his seat with confidence, no longer trying to hide under the desk or keep his feet tucked away. Instead, he placed his bag down, took out his books, and raised his hand when the teacher asked a question. His voice was clear, steady, and full of the confidence he had always buried deep inside. During recess, something even more magical happened. A group of children invited him to play. Before, they had run past him as if he wasn't there, but today they opened their circle wide enough to include him. He laughed as he ran across the playground, his new shoes pounding the ground with every joyful step. The sound was music to his ears. And somewhere far away, in the middle of his workday, the man who had bought those shoes paused for a moment. He thought of the boy, imagining his smile, his happiness. He didn't need to see it to know it was there. Deep down, he felt it. His heart was lighter, his day brighter. He realized that true happiness didn't come from money, success, or recognition, it came from knowing you had made a difference in someone's life. For the boy, it was more than just shoes. It was dignity. It was confidence. It was a reminder that he mattered. For the man, it was more than just kindness. It was fulfillment. It was meaning. It was the simple truth: a small act of help can create the biggest happiness. That evening, after a long day of school, the boy walked home differently than he ever had before. His steps were lighter, his shoulders straighter, and his face brighter. He wasn't just walking in new shoes, he was walking in new confidence. The children he passed no longer whispered or laughed. Some even greeted him with nods and smiles. For the first time in his life, he felt seen not as the poor boy with broken shoes, but simply as another student, another child, another human being worthy of respect. When he reached home, his mother noticed immediately. She saw the shoes, the sparkle in his eyes, and the joy in his smile. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized what someone had done for her son. She didn't have much, barely enough to keep food on the table, but knowing that a stranger had cared enough to help her boy filled her heart with gratitude she could never put into words. She hugged him tightly, whispering prayers for the kind soul who had made her child so happy. Meanwhile, across town, the man who had bought the shoes returned home from work. His day had been filled with meetings, paperwork, and the usual stress that came with adult life. Yet through it all, one thought had stayed with him: the look on that little boy's face when he tried on his new shoes. That smile had been worth more than any paycheck, any achievement, any recognition. As he sat in his quiet living room, he reflected on what had happened. It had been such a small act, really, just buying a pair of shoes. It hadn't cost him much money or time, but the impact it created was enormous. He realized that kindness worked like ripples in water. One small drop could spread out farther than you could ever imagine. The next day, when he walked past the school again, he saw the boy running across the yard with his classmates, laughing freely. The man paused for a moment, watching quietly from a distance. The boy no longer sat at the gate with downcast eyes, he was inside, where he belonged, living the life every child deserved. The man smiled to himself, feeling a deep sense of peace. He thought, this is what happiness truly means. Not the kind that fades after buying something for yourself, but the kind that grows stronger when you give to others. For the boy, those shoes were more than leather and laces. They were hope. They were a reminder that he mattered in this world. And for the man, that single act of kindness became a memory he would carry with him forever, a reminder that sometimes the smallest help creates the biggest joy. The story ended there, but its lesson remained timeless. Happiness doesn't come from what we keep. It comes from what we give. A small help can bring a big happiness.